Well, welcome, Sophie. Thanks for giving up your time to speak to the students this afternoon. Just by way of introduction, Sophie was educated in Weston-super-Mare, went to Broad Oak School and Weston College. She was the first person to be awarded a journalism bursary, and that was set up in memory of my sister, Jill. Sophie's since worked for local radio, regional telly, and then moved on to become a presenter and correspondent for the BBC nationally and internationally, and her career's taken her to various parts of the world, but today for us, as you can see, she's taken time out to be with us on one of our regular Zoom sessions. I'm sure she's full of great anecdotes about some of the stories she's covered and the fascinating people she's met along the way. So once again, thanks for being with us, Sophie. I'll now hand you over to the tender mercies of the young news hounds from the West Country.
Great, thank you.
Hi Sophie, hope you're well. I'm Dawson. I'm going to be hosting the interview today. So we've got all of our journalists from 6 schools across the trust here in Somerset, and we've got Mr. Dando with us, who you've just heard from. He's worked in news for 40 years or so, and we've got lots of young journalists, and we're going to ask you some questions. I know you're very busy, so we won't keep you too long today. But yes, we're going to start with my question, which is, as you are now the LA correspondent for the BBC, what was your first job when you joined the BBC?
My first job when I joined the BBC, what was my first job? When I joined the BBC, I joined as a BBC News trainee. So I was very lucky. And after I got the bursary in honour of Jill Dando, I then went on, that took me to Falmouth College of Art. So I was very lucky I could do a postgraduate, so a year's training. And then I joined the BBC as a trainee. So I was really lucky, and it meant that I got to work. You went to Bristol, so not far from where you all are now, and you had a few weeks training there. And then I went to Radio Shropshire. So the first on-air thing I did was at Radio Shropshire, and they didn't really trust me to read the news then. So I went out and did packages for the breakfast programme. So that was my first job at the BBC, where I learned to operate all the equipment and the radio cars that I found terrifying and all that kind of stuff. So that was my first job. Then I went back to Bristol, and then we did some television training, and then I went and worked at Midlands Today in Birmingham for a few months. So that was my first proper television job. And then from there I went to Devon to BBC Spotlight and the Politics show, which had just launched, and I spent 4 years there. And then I went to London and worked as a correspondent and reporter, and then I became a presenter on the news channel, and then I went back to being a correspondent, and then I came to Los Angeles. So in a nutshell, that's been my route from the BBC. But I did a year before that at ITV, where I was literally a newsroom assistant. So I did everything from printing off scripts, and for some reason they always used to think that I could make the printers work, and just I was a general dog's body for a year there, which was a fantastic experience, working in a newsroom, working out how it all worked, and I graduated to rolling auto cue. But yeah, that's basically my little route through broadcasting.
So thank you for that. We're now going to ask Amy for her question, please.
Hi, I was just wondering, was there a specific job or person or opportunity that really kick-started your presenting career?
Well, I think, quite life-changing for me was getting the Jill Dando scholarship, because at that stage I kind of really knew I wanted to go into broadcasting. And the good thing about broadcasting is there's no definite route that you have to take. But I was a bit sort of lost and was trying to get a job at different broadcasters and was offering to work for free but couldn't actually get a job. So getting that and getting the training at the BBC, that was kind of the most life-changing moment, I think. I think I was inspired by people at the time. There weren't that many female correspondents out in the field, and Kate Adie was a big influence, and I was lucky enough to meet her when I was at Falmouth College of Arts. And I always remember her saying to me, take any bus, you may think that you want to do this or you may want to present that program, but take any opportunity that arises. And I always remember her saying that to me, and I think that's really important, because it is an industry which you can do things in any way you can, really. And I think that's still true, probably more so with the advent of social media and all the different digital platforms we have at the moment. So I think that was good advice from Kate Adey. What was your original question? Sorry, it's a little bit early for me. Am I rambling on? Dawson, you're going to have your work cut out. I haven't been on air for weeks. So you're going to have a proper job as a chairing person. Have I answered the question or not?
Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amy. We're now going to go on to Heidi for her question, please.
Hi, my question is, why did you decide to become a journalist, and how did the Jill Downing Scholarship affect it?
So I think my mum tells me that I always wanted to become a journalist, and she showed me things. She moved house not very long ago and showed me things that I'd written when I was like super young. So I think I kind of always knew I wanted to be a journalist. And I remember leaving college. So I was at Western Sixth Form, as it was called then. I think it's Western College now. Did A-levels. Then I went off to university in London. I remember sitting at Western College, looking out the window and just thinking, there's a massive world out there and I'm going to go and like grab it. So I always kind of knew I was going to go off. And I think I had a dream about being a foreign correspondent. And I remember when I was at Western College, I actually met Jill. She came to speak to us. And at the time, I was kind of like, you know, my mum was a secretary and my friends' parents were teachers. And I remember when Jill came to speak at our sixth form college, I just kind of thought, wow, you know, you can be from here and you can go and do whatever you want. And I remember talking to her and, you know, that kind of inspiring me that you could go off and do something different that, you know, your parents didn't do or your friends' parents. And then I finished university and I sent off all sorts of letters to newspapers and to radio stations and to television stations, and all of them either just ignored me or said no thanks. And I was only offering to do work experience and work for free. So I kind of suddenly thought, oh gosh, maybe this isn't going to be as easy as I thought it was going to be. But I was quite determined, I think, very quietly, in that my parents were kind of like, you've got a good degree, why don't you go and get a job, you know, a proper job, whereas I was just waitressing all the time. And what I did was I carried on waitressing, and then I met a guy who was out on streets filming. He was a cameraman from London News Network, which was the regional ITV London programme. And I just went up to him and asked him how he got into it and said what I wanted to do. And then for the next 3 weeks, I basically carried his tripod around, his camera sticks, and just met everyone he worked with, and then got a runner's job there. And then I remember seeing, my mum actually sent me I think it was in the Western Mercury perhaps, but there was an advert in the newspaper about the Jill Downing Scholarship that the BBC were going to be offering the bursary, and she sent it to me. I think even in the post, which will be crazy to you guys, I think she actually cut it out and sent it to me in the post in London and said, this has got your name on it, you've got to apply for this. So I applied for that, and the people I was working with at the time, the journalists working in the television newsroom, were really encouraging and kind of helped me with my application form. And I remember being super, super nervous when I had the interview, thinking that, you know, this is going to change my life. This is like the biggest deal. This is much more important than A-levels or a degree or anything. And going for the interview at the BBC in Bristol and being so nervous, and yeah, when I opened the letter, I still remember the day. It was my friend's 21st birthday, and I got my boyfriend at the time to open it because I knew it was such a big deal and it would make everything different for me, and it did. So getting the bursary was super important, and I was really lucky.
If I can go on to Megan, please. Could I have your question?
Hi, I have 3 questions. Would you want me to read them all out to you or just one?
Yeah, do you know what? I'm so disorganized this morning because we haven't been doing very much, and suddenly it's the Golden Globes, and I think because there's a pandemic, I'm just going to grab a pen. I think because there's so much focus on the coronavirus and everyone's been stuck at home, that they want something nice and happy at the end. So I suddenly had to do all sorts of things before I came to speak to you, so forgive me. Anyway, I can scribble them down if you've got 3.
So, do you have any regrets?
Oh, regrets, I have a few. So that's question 1. Oh, should we just go? We'll go through that. Okay, so do I have any regrets? In my professional life, I don't think I have any regrets. no. People will always be full of advice, and I've noticed a lot of men higher up the food chain are often full of lots of advice, and people have said to me, you should be more strategic and you should plan. You know, I'm in Los Angeles at the moment, and when I arrived here, my new boss, who's based in Washington, DC, on the other side of America, said to me, you need to be thinking about where you're going to go next and thinking about your career path. And I was kind of like, wow, I haven't even started work in Los Angeles yet, and I hope to be here for 4 years. So some people have said to me, you should be strategic and you should be thinking about your next move all the time. I haven't really done that, but I'm now at the moment doing my dream job. I mean, it's really tough some days and you get very tired and there's lots of difficult parts of it, but I'm doing the job that I think is the best possible job I could ever want personally. And I've enjoyed every job along the way as well. So I think that probably a lot of people who know me would tell you I could have done things better, but do I have any regrets? Not really, no.
My second question is, what do you miss about Weston?
What do I miss about Weston? I miss so much about Weston at the moment because obviously I haven't been able to get back. I was hoping to come home for Christmas, and then things moved into different tiers the day that I was going to come home. So my brothers were on the phone and just saying, look, it's pointless. Come at another time when it's not Christmas. So what I miss most about Weston, I miss my mum and dad and my family, and most of my friends are still there. So all my friends that I met when I was 11 at Broad Oak Comprehensive School, most of them are still there, and I'm very lucky these days because obviously we have to catch up over Zoom like this and have little virtual parties. But yeah, basically, I miss my friends and my family, and I think Weston was the most wonderful place to grow up. And I remember when I first got to university in London, and everyone seemed a lot more glamorous than me and had lived around the world and were all international. And I thought, how boring to be from Weston-super-Mare. And now I look back and realise how lucky I was to grow up in this lovely place by the seaside with gorgeous walks and have great friends and grow up in this lovely, stable place and have this wonderful place to go back to. So I can't wait to come back. I don't know when that's going to be, but my mum's 70 in August, so I'm hoping if I don't get back before then I'll get there in August.
And my last question is, who is your favourite person to interview?
Oh, who's my favourite person to interview? Well, this may be a bit of a cliche, and there are many people that I've interviewed over the years that I loved interviewing. And to be honest, the people that I love interviewing most are normal people. And by that, I mean, you know, everyday people who've done amazing things. Like I never thought that I got starstruck by people who are very famous, but I did think like, wow, this person did this amazing thing, and what a great privilege that I get to speak to them. Having said that, almost just over a year ago, the Golden Globe nominations come out this morning. So I've got to nip off and write a piece for Radio 4 on that. But this time last year, it was a little bit earlier because it's been delayed due to the pandemic. But I did meet Brad Pitt on the red carpet. And having always been, you know, quite a serious journalist and done a lot of political reporting on all that kind of stuff, I thought that this red carpet and movie star stuff was all a bit frivolous until I met Brad Pitt, who I remember him coming down the red carpet at the Golden Globes. And it was the first time I'd been to sort of a really massive event like this. And it's really amazing. You walk in and I just couldn't believe the scale of the thing. And this red carpet went forever, and all the people in these amazing dresses like you've never seen before. And we had to go back. The problem is working for, it's not a problem, but when you work for the BBC, you've got so many different outlets, we call them. There's so many different programs that you have to have deadlines for. And my producer, who's done the Golden Globe, she's been in Los Angeles for like 15 years, probably more, and does it every year. And to her, it's entirely boring. And she said, we've got to go and do this report for the 6 o'clock news or whatever. And I said, no. Brad Pitt is coming down this red carpet, and he's actually stopping to speak to people, because a lot of the stars, you know, they're with their PR, their press people, and they may or may not stop. And I just said to Reagan, my producer, I am going nowhere. And Brad Pitt came down the carpet, and I managed to ask him a few questions. And the Variety reporter standing next to me went to shake his hand when he left. And I just sort of saw an opportunity, so stuck my hand out. And Brad Pitt took it and said, have a great night after we finished this interview. And as I turned around, all sort of like young and girly, my producer Reagan just looked at me and said, "You have just disgraced the BBC." But I didn't care, because he's one of these people you'll meet in life who just have this amazing aura. You know, Barack Obama had the same thing as well. There's just certain people who you can kind of feel their presence. But having said that, that's kind of like, that put a spring in my step for probably my best day of 2020, given that we all know what happened after that. But I think the most interesting people to interview are real people who've just, ordinary people who've done amazing things, and, you know, what inspired them. And, you know, at the moment, I don't know if you saw the inauguration of Joe Biden. We've got a new president here in America, but there was a young poet who performed that day, Amanda Gorman, and she's 22 years old, and she wrote this poem and performed it so perfectly in front of all these people around the world. So she's next on my list. I'm desperate to speak to her and to find out how that felt and how she went about doing it.
It's amazing, isn't it, what can become somebody's normal? You know, you're saying for your producer, you know, 15 years and, oh, it's just the Golden Globes, and, you know, but it's an incredible experience, and, you know, you make it sound amazing. So yeah, I'm quite envious there. Very lucky you.
Well, lucky. Every day is different, and I think that's a good thing, that, you know, it's very difficult to get bored, I think. And the BBC does this thing with foreign correspondents. It's called a rotation. So you come here for 2 years, and then you can extend for 2 years if it's good for your life and good for the BBC. So you kind of never really get tired. And there's a big rotation coming up at the moment, where a lot of jobs, particularly in the United States, are up because they've all extended, because we had President Trump, who obviously took up a lot of time and a lot of reporting, and it was very difficult to swap people in. So there's a big rotation coming up at the moment. But yeah, everyone sort of, you remain fresh. I think that's one of the good reasons behind it, that you are kind of, you do see it with an outsider's eyes, and, you know, yeah.
Yeah, I'd definitely be feeling fresh if it was Brad Pitt, I think. So sounds good. Jacob, could we go on to your question, please?
Hello. So I was just wanted to continue talking about your journalistic career in the United States. I was wondering if you'd be able to sum up your experience of reporting in the US in one phrase or one word, because obviously it's been very eventful in the past 4 years.
Yeah, one phrase or one word. So I've been here for nearly 2 years now, and obviously I've only lived in the United States under President Trump. I think the last year has just been pretty bonkers, and it's been bonkers in so many ways. You know, we had a kind of a very different president, and obviously we're operating in a pandemic. And I think there's been a number of times where I've looked around and just thought, wow, you know, for much of the election, I was in Phoenix, Arizona, because Arizona used to be what we call a red state. It was very Republican. And this year, for the first time, it went Democrat. And so in the run up to that, there's lots of interest in swing states, as you probably know, what we call marginal constituencies in the UK. And so I spent a lot of time there, but they're an open carry state, which means you can just carry guns. And, you know, you kind of like hear about these things in theory when you live in the UK, and like Americans carry guns, but actually when you're standing there reporting live, and it's just you and your camera person and producer, and you're in a sea of Trump supporters who have been very open about the fact that they don't like the media. And they're really heavily armed. I mean, they have like rifles and sidearms and like these vests, I think they call them camo vests or something, and they're full of like ammunition. And it's kind of so crazy to me, you know, we just didn't grow up with that. You don't. And at the first, I kind of found it really amazing, and therefore it almost had a sort of novelty factor. But then I realized by the end of the day, when you're doing live broadcasting in front of people who have guns in America, it's actually really tiring. I just found it really tiring by the end of the day, sort of, you know, being very careful, you know, you just don't want to upset a crowd. And so, yeah, I mean, I think being in Los Angeles as well, particularly at this time, it is kind of crazy, you know. We've heard so many newscasters over the past year use the word unprecedented, and it has been in so many ways, both politically and because of the pandemic. And then on top of that, I'm in this wonderful position that yeah, I get to do all the sort of award ceremonies as well. So, and this year they'll be very different. But for me, last year, it's the first time I went to the Oscars. And so I've got this wonderful variety that one moment, a bit like the last 24 hours. So yesterday I was busy researching and speaking to environmental lawyers about what effect Joe Biden's first executive orders about climate change are going to have on communities in towns that are reliant on coal and things in the west coast of America. And this morning I get a call at 5 a.m. saying we need you to do a piece on the Golden Globes. So it's kind of like there's this wonderful variety which really suits someone like me who's a little bit of a flitty by nature and a bit of a scatterbrain. So I really love doing one thing one day and something completely different the next. A lot of people don't fancy that, but it's kind of right up my street.
Over to Esme, please.
I have 2 questions. My first one is, how did your love for writing start?
How did my love for writing start? Do you know what? I think, like, I always loved stories, but I think that I always wanted to be a broadcaster rather than a writer. And now I'm sort of like, now I'm so old and I've been doing it for so long, I'm kind of coming around to enjoying writing more. But I used to spend hours and hours with my best friend, Laura, when we were I met Laura when I was about 11, and we used to spend hours interviewing each other, just in ridiculous accents. And I remember my mum coming to pick me up from Laura's house and just sort of saying, all I hear is this cackling from upstairs. So we would like take on different characters and just interview each other. And she sent me a podcast the other day that I can't remember the name of it, but it was very, very funny. And she said, basically, we were before our time and we were doing this when we were like 11. So I think I loved interviewing people and I loved chatting to people and telling their stories. And, you know, it's a very difficult time at the moment in broadcasting. There's lots of redundancies and cuts being made and all that kind of stuff. And whenever redundancy comes up where you can sort of take a payment and leave the BBC, I've always sort of said to my friends, you know, what would I do? Because I'd need to do something that basically I like to stand around chatting all day. And then, you know, at the moment, that's kind of my job. I stand around talking to people all day. And at the end of the day, we make a report on what people have told us. And sometimes we have to do that very, very quickly. And sometimes we do it in a live format and just stand in front of a camera and tell people what's gone on. But I think for me, it started with a love of interviewing people and broadcasting rather than writing itself. But now we have so many different platforms and digital platforms and online that I get to write a lot more, and I realise that I do really enjoy it. That's the other good thing about the BBC and probably most broadcasters now, that you get to do a bit of everything. So you get to do a bit of writing, so you can write articles for online, you make radio packages and TV packages and digital, which is different as well. So that's the cool thing. But I think my love of it started with broadcasting rather than writing.
My last one is, how did you manage to keep your personal life and reporter life separate?
Oh, well, that's an interesting question. I think that if you are on TV, that can be very difficult to keep them completely separate. But, and I think that actually one thing that's probably maybe a bit serious for you guys now, but, you know, it's a wonderful job and you get a wonderful variety. And you know, I quite frequently, even now, next month, or this month rather, I'll have worked for the BBC for 20 years. And I still think I have days when I can't believe someone's paying me to do it. You know, it's just so great and so interesting. But it does have an impact on your personal life. Like a lot of my friends that I was at school with when I was your age have lovely children and have this lovely life that sometimes, you know, when you asked me earlier about what I miss about Western, my friends and, you know, my brother and my nieces and nephews and that kind of family life, you can do that if you're a foreign correspondent from the BBC, but I think it's much more difficult. And I often think, you know, I can dash out of the door, someone can call me at 3 a.m. and the next thing I know, I'll be on a plane to, like this time last year, we got a call at 3 a.m. and had to go to Vancouver Island because Harry and Meghan had decided to leave the royal family and we thought that they were heading there. And I was there for, you know, 2 or 3 weeks. So it's very difficult. I've had lots of difficult conversations over the years about people who thought that I should have been there for their birthday or thought that I should have been there for their wedding even, and I haven't been able to. So I think having a job like this is really exciting and it's really lovely, but it's very difficult to have a stable personal life. Thank you for having me. Thank you for all your questions. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.